the Gospel of Thomas Awakening series, The Kingdom Within, Awakening Beyond Religion, Fear, Guilt, Control, Division, Illusion, and Shame. You can view all articles and studies at gospelofthomasstudy.com. Awakening Beyond Religion, Fear, Guilt, Control, Division, Illusion, and Shame. This collection of writings explores the Gospel of Thomas as a text centered on awakening, self-knowledge, and inner transformation, rather than the fear-based frameworks that later became embedded in many forms of institutional religion. Discovered among the Nag Hammadi library texts in 1945, the Gospel of Thomas presents 114 sayings attributed to Yeshua that focus not on historical narrative, ritual authority, or theological systems, but on direct insight into the nature of consciousness, spirit, and the kingdom within. Many religious traditions have historically emphasized themes on sin, guilt, condemnation, and eternal punishment as central mechanisms of spiritual control. In contrast, the Gospel of Thomas largely removes these structures and instead speaks in the language of awakening, perception, and remembrance of one's true nature. The sayings repeatedly point the reader inward, suggesting that the true barrier between humanity and spiritual life is not divine judgment, but ignorance, inner division, and a lack of awareness. Within this framework, salvation is not presented as something granted externally through ritual, institutional authority, or belief alone. Rather, it emerges through self-knowledge and the awakening of inner clarity. Yeshua appears not primarily as an object of worship, but as a teacher of recognition, revealing that the living light already exists within those who are able to perceive it. These articles examine the Gospel of Thomas from multiple angles, including the distinction between the historical teacher Yeshua and the later religious figure constructed through institutional theology. The text challenge to ritual practices such as baptism and circumcision, and its symbolic reinterpretation of concepts like evil, demons, hell, and spiritual death. Taken together, these writings reveal a radically different vision of spirituality, one that emphasizes awakening rather than obedience, understanding rather than dogma, and inner transformation rather than external religious structures. The Gospel of Thomas invites readers to move beyond fear-based interpretation of faith and instead explore the deeper possibility that the kingdom Yeshua spoke of is not a distant place, but a state of awakened consciousness already present within the human soul. Awakening beyond institutional religion. This category focuses on how the Gospel of Thomas shifts spirituality away from external religious systems and toward direct inner awakening. Instead of emphasizing institutions, doctrines, or authority structures, these writings explore how the teachings attributed to Yeshua call individuals to rediscover the kingdom within themselves. The articles in this section explain how Thomas presents spirituality as personal transformation and inner realization, rather than adherence to religious institutions, traditions, or hierarchical systems. All these articles that are mentioned now can be found, the links, in the description of this video. Just go below and pick one and read through. The Kingdom Within, Awakening Beyond Institutional Religion. This study explores the central Thomas teaching that the kingdom is not found in temples, churches, or institutions, but within the human being. It examines how Yeshua's sayings redirect attention away from external authority toward inner awareness and spiritual awakening. The next article, The Gospel of Thomas, Awakening Beyond Religion, Fear, Guilt, and Shame. This article examines how the Gospel of Thomas removes many of the fear-based elements later associated with organized religion. Instead of guilt, condemnation, and shame, the text emphasizes self-knowledge, clarity, and inner transformation. The next segment, Awakening Beyond Religion, seeing the Gospel of Thomas through clarity. This piece encourages readers to approach the Gospel of Thomas without the interpretive lens of institutional theology. It explores how the sayings function as keys to awakening rather than doctrinal statements. 2. The identity and meaning of Yeshua. This category explores how the Gospel of Thomas presents Yeshua not primarily as a religious figure or object of worship, but as a teacher of inner awakening. These writings investigate the difference between the historical teacher Yeshua and a later religious figure constructed through institutional Christianity. The articles highlight how Thomas frames Yeshua's role as revealing knowledge that awakens the divine nature already present within humanity. Article in this category, Yeshua versus Jesus, the split between awakening and religion. This article explores the distinction between the historical teacher Yeshua and the later religious figure known as Jesus. It examines how institutional religion transformed the message of awakening into a structured belief system. The true meaning of Yeshua as salvation through inner knowing. This study analyzes the deeper meaning of the name Yeshua and reframes salvation as awakening through inner knowledge, rather than external redemption through ritual or doctrine. 3. The Gospel of Thomas versus traditional Christianity. These writings examine the major structural differences between the Gospel of Thomas and the canonical New Testament narratives. Unlike the traditional Gospels, Thomas does not focus on historical events such as the birth, crucifixion, or resurrection. Instead, Thomas presents a collection of sayings intended to awaken understanding, suggesting that transformation occurs through insight rather than historical belief. Articles in this category, Why the Gospel of Thomas Excludes the Birth, Crucifixion, and Resurrection. This article investigates why the Gospel of Thomas omits the foundational narrative elements of traditional Christianity. It explores how the text focuses instead on direct wisdom, teachings designed to awaken understanding. 4. The dismantling of religious ritual. One of the most radical aspects of the Gospel of Thomas is its quiet dismantling of many rituals that became central to institutional religion. Rather than emphasizing outward practices, the sayings repeatedly suggest that inner transformation replaces ritual observance. This category explores how Thomas challenges practices such as baptism, circumcision, and other symbolic religious acts. Articles in this category, The Death of Ritual, How the Gospel of Thomas Dismantles Baptism. This article explores how the Gospel of Thomas reframes spiritual purification as inner awakening rather than external ritual washing. How Yeshua dismantles the purpose of circumcision in the Gospel of Thomas. This piece examines how the sayings challenge the necessity of physical covenant markers by emphasizing spiritual transformation over bodily ritual. 5. Reframing darkness, evil, and spiritual death. The Gospel of Thomas approaches concepts like evil, hell, demons, and death in a symbolic and psychological way rather than a literal, supernatural framework. Instead of external enemies such as Satan or demons, the text repeatedly describes ignorance, division, and inner blindness as the true obstacles to spiritual life. These articles explore how Thomas reframes traditional religious ideas about darkness and evil as states of consciousness rather than external forces. Articles in this category: From Darkness to Light, Reframing Hell in the Gospel of Thomas. This article examines how hell can be understood as a state of inner separation and ignorance rather than a physical place of eternal punishment. The Gospel of Thomas, Awakening Beyond the Language of Satan. This study explores how the Gospel of Thomas largely avoids the language of Satan and external demonic forces, suggesting that spiritual struggle is primarily internal rather than cosmic. Evil Reframed, Inner Blindness and Division in the Gospel of Thomas. This article explains how evil is presented not as a supernatural being, but as the condition of spiritual blindness, fragmentation, and disconnection from the living light within. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time of listening. This is an inner, personal, very specific journey for anyone who wishes to awaken and learn the truth. Take your time, enjoy the learning, step by step, and embrace it with a heart open, knowing that there is more than we have been told. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we love you very, very much. Have a beautiful day.